Mic check.
So my name is Boney. I'm a user researcher at Bethesda Softworks, and I recognize that's kind of a niche role. So for the most part, well, let me take a step back. Technically, I work for the publisher. I get to interface with the different studios, and we kind of sit in between the business side and the design side, and our
Yeah.
research kind of informs design priorities for the most part. Ideally, it informs design priorities.
So, like, what is your like day to day? Like, what do you do like on the daily that's like sort of bread and butter so everybody can kind of get a better understanding of like what that actually is and what all of that encompasses really?
It would start with a research request, usually coming from a producer on behalf of the design team. Sometimes it comes straight from the design team, and they'll ask us to get player feedback on specific systems or just validating their work altogether. Like, does the
Hmm.
game actually feel good? Does it meet players' expectations? Things of that nature. So we start with that request, and then we decide what's the best way to get that information. So we
Hmm.
choose the appropriate methodology, build surveys, and then recruit playtesters to come into the lab, have them play the game, and going through analyzing all the feedback, and then
Hmm.
organizing the reports in a way where we're effectively communicating what are the top issues, and then what are the nice to know things or things
Hmm.
that would be bonuses for players.
What are those conversations like as far as like when you're getting issues or when you're getting certain feedback and whatnot? Like, how is that feedback sort of taken and then I guess implemented to where it is, beneficial for the player or whatever the goal may be that you are trying to accomplish? Like, what are those conversations like as far as like talking to either the design side or trying to get one side to see another point of view, another side? I'm sure all of that can sort of kind of like mix together, things like that. So, how does all that kind of work itself out?
For the most part, a lot of those conversations happen without us in the room. And I say that because, like, we'll have a conversation with, say, the designers or the producers, and they'll let us know what their intent is behind the game. And we kind of take that generally throughout the research process, how players play a game and how it is designed in terms of how they want players to play the game is
Hmm.
very often not the same thing. I didn't like at the top. What I normally would say is that the primary role or the primary function of my role is to be the voice of the player. With that said, the conversation from our side is okay, these are the design decisions that you're making. This is how players are responding to it. Ultimately, not telling them how to design the game because we're not designers, you know, professional courtesy things of that nature.
Hmm. Yeah.
It doesn't make sense for us to be like, oh, you need to do this, you need to do this.
Hmm.
But more so just communicating that while this may be your design intent, players want this and they're going to do this, and there's not much you can do to stop players from doing whatever they want with your game.
Hmm.
So finding that middle ground on how to accommodate player play styles with how you want the game to ultimately play.
You are the voice of the player, as it were. Like, obviously, in order to be sort of the voice of the player, you have to be a player. So I'm assuming you game and things like that. What were the things that you were playing when you were growing up and sharpen your tools, I guess, for you to be able to have that sort of, background and foundation. So when you are having these conversations, it's like, okay, I know players want this. I'm getting feedback. I've experienced this as a player. I guess take that trip down memory lane and sort of all those games that you played and stuff like that and make that sort of the foundation for what you do.
To the first part of the question, growing up, I primarily played sport games and then
Hmm.
action adventure, and then as I got older, I got into RPGs, and that
Hmm.
was pretty much the only three genres I played. Which, for the most part, the studios within the publisher typically make those types of games.
Right.
Coming into the job, I had a lot of historical context for how those games typically played.
Hmm.
So with that in mind, also understanding like the evolution of time and technology.
Yeah.
So yes, to a certain extent, I have my own personal expectations for how, I guess AAA games should be performing or should be
Hmm.
playing or how they should feel. But at the same time, the larger gaming audience also has a lot of the same expectations, whether
Hmm.
they're exactly the same or just slightly different. For me, making sure that things are progressing forward, because at the end of the day, it is business, and with that in mind, products have to keep up with the rest of the industry. And on the other side of that coin, recognizing that a lot of because the average age of a gamer is like 32, I think. So there's a lot of nostalgia that plays into it as well.
So when you're doing your research, like what are the sort of elements or sort of like key parts about your research? Like I know it's like different elements to, like you said, players, and you don't want your own like biases and sort of all things like that to sort of fluctuate the data. So like
Hmm.
how is that data sort of curated? Is it just basically, let's say, it's getting like feedback from playtesters or something of that sort, and sort of like giving them a situation where it's like, hey, we need for you to look for this, 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 and this? Or is it just play the game and just give us your experience and we'll take that and sort of mold that how we need to? How do you work out, the different avenues of figuring out if your data, the actual player experience, or if that's just something that they experienced in that moment? Like, how do you sort of differentiate that?
That's another part of research. We never tell them what we're looking for.
Hmm.
Sometimes you can kind of pick it out through the questions, but generally we'll ask for feedback about like the holistic experience. So let's
Hmm.
say, for example, it's an action adventure game. We'll ask about difficulty. We'll ask about combat. We'll ask about enemy AI. We'll ask about pace, navigation, and like all the different components and systems of the game. And they'll typically, rate it based on their experience. And then how we justify or give context for those ratings would be the open-ended like text box feedback.
Okay.
And that's really where we get the most valuable information. I mean, the metrics are important
Hmm.
because that's how you kind of track the progress.
Right.
But a lot of times, like let's say something was frustrating. If something is frustrating, a player is definitely gonna want to talk about it.
Yeah.
Constructing the survey in a way where we give them the opportunity to give feedback about different systems, then we can kind of pinpoint where exactly that frustration was.
What is sort of the next step of user research? Like, is it like sort of evolving as like the technology evolves? And like, how do you see your job within the industry and sort of, moving forward? Where do you see user research and play testing and just all these different things sort of lining up within the framework of kind of how the industry works now and kind of into the future?
Well, the first thing I would say is that at least from my perspective, it seems that business decisions are often driven by data. So being essentially a hub of data as user researchers, whether it be, making proper design decisions or deciding whether or not to prioritize certain projects, like all of this, like
Hmm.
user research in some ways unintentionally informs a lot of these decisions. Like for example, I personally haven't been a part of any game development where user research was responsible. Well, when I say user research was responsible, the research prompted business decisions to like cancel a game or something like that.
Hmm.
That is one of those things where, let's say, user research wasn't in the picture, and they just, oh, designers, we trust you to make, a great game, and then they put it out, and then it completely flops because they didn't have any player feedback throughout
Hmm.
the development. Because, I mean, if you're working on something, more often than not, you're gonna pay attention more to the good, even if you recognize the flaws.
Yeah.
Just like in general and in the future, it is generally a good idea to have user research as part of the development process to make sure that you're hitting the right note.
The data is sort of king right now. Everybody is like, data is gold right now.
Mm-hmm.
And that's in multiple industries, not just, this one. Do you see that increasing? Do you see that sort of leveling itself out? Like get into the AI age and all of these different things. Like, they're always trying to find a different way to, make that next dollar or to enhance. I can only assume that some of these companies are going to be saying, hey, why do we need user researchers? Why don't we just use AI? You know what I'm saying? Or something to that effect. So, like, what is your opinion on how that conversation is inevitably going to be a part of the industry, is a part of the industry, and sort of how AI is sort of being used as a tool, but also you can see where it could potentially be used to, get rid of people's jobs or corner
Mm-hmm.
cut these different things that you're talking about that's important, like the user feedback and the player feedback and all of these different things. Like, how do you kind of see that?
I have a couple different positions on AI. One, I recognize that the investments have already been made and they will
Mm-hmm.
continue to be made. So it's absolutely not going anywhere. And at the same time, there's, you know, for some it's a fear and others it's, I don't, I kind of want to I don't want to use the word premonition, maybe omen, where, people feel that AI might eventually replace the job of a user researcher. I recognize that that is a very real possibility, and at the same time, understanding that when we get, if or when we get to a place where machine learning and AI in general is able to develop the ability to discern the nuances of the human experience,
Mm-hmm.
then I could understand. Then I can understand it replacing people. However, that's something that's very unique to humans,
Mm-hmm.
which makes us a necessity. In general, with AI in general, I can see, I could see hypothetically, the money bottom line, hard nose crunching CEO saying, oh, let's try to cut costs by any means. If we have this AI, why do we need to pay these humans?
Like the future for you as far as user research, is that sort of like where you want to stay? Do you kind of want to elevate the position? How do you look at yourself within the user research bubble and sort of kind of where you fit in as far as the future AI rolling in, all these different
Mhm.
things? Where do you see yourself here within the nearest future?
That's a good question. I like where I'm at. I can see opportunities for growth in it. And at the same time, I wouldn't necessarily call myself a humanitarian. So I am an advocate for humans in general. If I had it my way, I could sit, all the CEOs of giant tech companies in different industries, because
Mhm.
technology is in every industry at this point.
Right.
I would sit them down and have them watch Monsters Inc. over and over and over until they understand that it's actually more profitable if humans are happy than, in a state of fear.
Yeah.
So that's where, if people fear, for example, generative AI being used in games, people fear that, and when I say people, I mean players, they fear that the quality of games that they love is at jeopardy because of generative AI, then, me being, I guess, several steps removed from those decision makers, I question the amount of investment in that and the use of it, because that, while you may save on production costs, you may not make as much money because people won't necessarily be able to connect with it and deal with it.
Mm.
Which I did mention, another part of user research is that user research is done on AI. Like, you need
Yeah.
to understand how people use it, and in certain cases, those conversations also lend itself to the ethics of its use. So with that in mind, that with every product, every service, there is a user experience. There's research to be done.
Mm-hmm. No doubt. Just to close out, if you want people to reach out to you, find you on social, anything that you're working on, that you connected to, just sort of give us a rundown.
I would say within like the professional world, I can be found on LinkedIn. You can find me in the Black and Gaming Discord.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty active in there sometimes. And yeah, for the most part, that's it.
Gotcha.